Very good evening to you, and welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101, Thursday evening, getting close to the weekend. Tonight, we're going to be talking labor. We're going to be talking particularly that scandalous 8% increase to the public servants that the government gave a couple of weeks ago. Scandalous, scandalous. And we are going to be talking about that tonight. We expect some friends dropping by. We expect Lincoln Lewis to drop by. We expect Coretta McDonald to drop by. And so we're going to get the perspective of the trade unionists, and a couple of other friends are expected to drop by. So we are going to be talking about that 8%. Um, Please share the link and let everyone know that we are live. It's good to be back. On Tuesday, we had Dr. Jeffrey on. Last night, we had Ralph Ramkaran on. And tonight, we are going to be talking about the assault on labor. The government continued decision not to engage the unions in collective bargaining. It engages GAU in collective bargaining. It engages the FITOG unions, but not unions that it consider not to be politically aligned to the ruling party. So we're going to be talking about the continued assault on the principle of collective bargaining. And we're going to talk about the atrocious 8% increase to the public servants against the backdrop of all the money that the government is getting. Government is going back and asking for more money, asking the National Assembly for more money. And it's spending that money like they would say in the old days, a drunken sailor. But when it comes to the public servants, it cannot give the public servants a substantial increase. This problem of public servants' wages go way back. All governments, all our post-colonial governments have violated the principle of collective bargaining. But if the previous governments could say they didn't have the money, excuse me, this government certainly cannot say that. It cannot say it doesn't have the money, and it cannot say that it is not being sharing out money to other categories of workers. So as we await our guests, I would like to welcome everyone down to Politics 101. I'd like to welcome those of you who are joining us from Guyana, those of you who are joining us from the rest of the Caribbean, the wider Caribbean. Welcome to Politics 101. And those of you who are joining us from further afield, North America, Canada, the United States, welcome to Politics 101. And of course, our European residents, viewers, those of you who are joining us from the United Kingdom, from the European mainland, France. I know some of you are joining us from France. Welcome to Politics 101. Those of you who are joining us from Suriname, French Guyana, welcome. Welcome to Politics 101. We didn't get last night, we didn't get to talk about the election of Hakeem Jeffries to the leadership of the Democrats in Congress, the first Black person to head a congressional party delegation, caucus. We like to wish him well. He's a friend of the struggle for equality and inclusiveness in Guyana. He has come under tremendous assault from the Guyana government. I wonder what they're saying now that he has become the most powerful Democratic member of Congress. Congratulations to Brother Hakeem Jeffries, who is now the minority leader in Congress. We are awaiting our guests. We are awaiting Lincoln Lewis, Coretta McDonald. We are awaiting them. Brother Ganesh Mahipaul has also promised to join us. I know that the funeral today of PNC stalwart and my countryman, Gerald Willibus, a long-standing member of the PNC, died recently and has been buried today. My condolences to his family, his brother. We are waiting Ganesh Mahipaul, among others, to join us. And we are condolences, of course, go to the Willibus family originally from Buxton. Only last year, earlier this year, Gerald went home to Buxton to bury his brother, my good friend, Ronald Willibus. And less than a year later, Gerald is gone too. Must be very difficult for a family to bury two siblings, two brothers in the same year. My condolences to the Willibus family and to the Buxtonians. Gerald was a class ahead of me in school at Buxton Government Secondary School. Ronald also went to Buxton Government Secondary School, but he was a few classes ahead of me, but he became my friend later on. Ronald was, Gerald was closer to me. Condolences, and I know the PNC people were at that funeral today. So we're waiting our guests to come in for us to talk about this scandalous 8% that these people have the temerity to offer public servants. You know, the ice pass public servants. Ice pass public servants. Ice pass public servants. Public servants, of course, are the ones who make the government work, yet you're offering them next to nothing. Please share the link. Please share the link and let everyone know that we are live. We are live, and we're going to tear in tonight into this scandalous offer. But it's not an offer, because offer means that you're negotiating with the unions. You're negotiating with the unions. But the government has absolutely no shame. And every day they're asking, why are we referring to Guyana's emerging apartheid state? In the United States, capitalist country, a post-segregation country, which means the United States itself had its own form of apartheid and segregation. We saw the government negotiating with the unions, the rail workers' unions. And the unions, of course, are not satisfied with what was given to them. It was generous compared with what they had at first, but they wanted, I think, 6 days leave, 6 days paid leave. And they're arguing with the government over that. I think the Biden administration is trying, well, they passed that bill today because they didn't want to leave it for the Republicans to come in and to railroad it. But the point I am making here is that in the United States of America, the government, a capitalist government, is speaking to workers, negotiating with workers. And in our country, a third world country, well, I don't like that term, but a post-independence, post-colonial country, where the struggle for the workers' right to bargain, the struggle for the unions to bargain on behalf of the work is a sacred struggle. It is that struggle that led to the birth of the formal trade union movement, the first trade union in Guyana way back in 1921. That struggle. The struggle, of course, to bargain would have started before, but if we use the formal trade union movement, 1921, 100 years ago, our country was invaded in 1953 by the British because the government of that day, limited self-government, albeit, passed a law to give workers the right to benefit, to bargain, through their unions. In fact, it was that bill that was being passed in Parliament in 1953, October 1953, that eventually prompted the British at the origin of the America to invade our country. So the right for workers to bargain is not something that is easy. Emancipation from enslavement was about the right of labor, to determine how it should be paid. The history of indentureship itself has been a history of labor fighting for the right to bargain on their own behalf. Countries like ours, it's about that fundamental right. The Christians will say it's a God-given right, or the religious people will say the same. Because labor is power. What we do every day, those of us who are lucky to be working, is that we go out every day and we sell our labor power in order to get enough so that we can reproduce that power to go out to work the next day. Ideologically, I stand on one side of the fence. Some people believe that capital brings wealth to a country. I believe strongly that labor is the basis, the primary basis of wealth. It can't be otherwise. Capital did not help Guyana to survive. Didn't my people before me slave for this country? Now you look me in my face with scorn and want to eat out all my corn. I build a cabin, I plant a corn. It's not me, Robert Nesta Marley, who's wiser than me. He's making a plea for labor. And in 2022, almost 6 decades after formal independence, in the midst of unprecedented wealth, labor is still, in a sense, fighting to be consulted on its own value. You know, they like to talk about something not in the law. Guyana is not an apartheid state because apartheid is not in the law. But the law says that you must consult with the unions. It's enshrined in the law. Yet you don't. De jure, by law, you must consult with labor. But de facto, in fact, you do not consult. You're violating your own law. Be true to what you put on paper. That's America. And I'm saying it here tonight. Guyana government, be true to what you put on paper. See, two of my friends are here, so I will shut up and bring them in. First, Ganesh, good evening, my brother.
Good evening, David. Thank you for having me on your program once again.
And I assume you were at the funeral today.
No, I was not. Unfortunately, I had some other pressing matters to attend to.
Okay, but you're present there. Mr. Lewis, good evening.
Good evening, my brother, and how do you do?
Well, I am not doing well. I am not doing well because whenever labor is being assaulted in the way that it is being assaulted by this government, it has always been assaulted by all post-colonial governments. The right to collective bargain is a sacred right. And I'm sick and tired of governments just trampling on it. My view is there is no Guyana without labor, and there is no healthy Guyana without the right of labor to determine its own value. Lincoln Lewis, you're the trade unionist, you're the trade union historian, you're the collective bargain person. It's right all over you from the time I know you as a little boy, since I know you going back to the 1980s. Collective bargain has always been two words that you have spoken so many times, formally and informally. Why in 2022 our government still not honoring the right to collective bargaining?
Thank you, David. Thank you, my brother. Thanks, comrades, friends, and well wishers. Let me just start by making this point. When you live in a lawless society, the people who are custodians of the law take the opportunity not to respect them. We live in a lawless society because even when I turn the Facebook these days, you always find somebody beating some police or some police fighting with somebody. It tells you how law and order has broken down and the respect for those who are given the opportunity to see the law being respected, how people treated them. Let me say to you, this is about governance. This issue is about governance. And whether people believe in governance or they believe in dictatorship. For instance, there are only two institutions that were named outside of government or cabinet or whatever. Two institutions by name. It's the cooperatives and the trade union were named in the Constitution. But this government, while we are named in the Constitution, they partner. They talk about the role of the trade union, role of the cooperative in the Constitution. But the government embraces the private sector as the partner and not the cooperatives. Neither. They want to break up the co-op and they want to break up the trade union. Because they see it as one thing. It's now, David, you're conscious of it, that we are in a new world. A world where the oligarchs decide that they are going to control even not only workers but the masses, and they are going to determine. And we have to see it in that light. These guys who come to us and ask for our votes at election time, I do not believe that they believe in one iota of the things that they say to us, the promises that they make from time to time. And because of that, when it comes to the issue of collective bargaining, in as much as it's enshrined in the Constitution, of 147 of the Constitution, and you can find it in the Trade Union Recognition and Certification Law, 23(1) of the Trade Union Recognition Act, right? Or the Trade Union Recognition Act, 23(1) makes it very clear that where an employer, where a trade union has been granted recognition, the employer the employer has to negotiate with that trade union in good faith. This government decided that they're not going to negotiate with some unions at all. At all. They will not. And the only union that they encourage any sort of negotiation is GAU. They tolerate it because, as you know, GAU is the industrial arm of the PPP. So when they move to destroy collective bargaining, is that when they do that, is that the workers themselves, after some time, will lose faith in the trade unions that they are members of, and they will voice GAU on them. That is what's happening. And we need to.
And so the refusal to engage in collective bargaining has a political slant to it. More than that, it's a sinister or not so sinister move to break up the trade union movement. Ganesh, let me bring you in.
Before Ganesh come in, I point you raised just now, David, about breaking up of the trade union. You know, on Saturday, a young man came to us to talk with us about. He said, I come out from Kokwani. He said, we don't have jobs here. He's looking for a job. And he said to me, a senior minister of the government, was in Kokwani. And he raised the issue of the government, of what is taking place with these foreign companies that are coming into the country. And they are imposing minimum wage. The minimum is 70,000, what have you, minimum wage on people. And he expects them to do better. He said, the minister said to him, that what you need is strong trade union. That was what the minister said to him. He said his response for the minister, how can you tell me about strong trade union? And I was at Rusal. And are you breaking up the union? He said, you don't want union? Are you do to break it up? He said, they had the exchange. And he said, well, the money that they're paying, we can't pay them, you know. We can't work for that money based on the cost of living. He said, minister told him, well, if you can't work for that, go to Suriname and find a job. That is how contemptuous our political operatives are. I just come in to make that point because you raised the issue about how breaking up a trade union. Thank you, brother.
Yes, it's a very valid point. Ganesh, I was making the point that you are the youngest member here on this panel tonight, and you of age against the backdrop of an argument that has been made that the trade unions, as we knew them back in the 70s and the 80s and the 60s and before, are not the same. Well, the role of the trade unions as we knew them back then must change. And there is this, has been this talk about the trade unions being nation builders and the trade unions being allies of capital rather than representing workers. Quite a sharp change in philosophical outlook. Where do you stand on the role of the trade unions in a country like Guyana and our wider Caribbean?
Thank you very much, Dr. Hines, and let me say good night to my friend Lincoln Lewis, who's on the panel with me. I want to start off by saying to you that I served as the secretary of the University of Guyana Student Society some years back, and then I ascended to the presidency of the University of Guyana Student Society. So when it comes to representing a cause, and when it comes to representing the interests of people, I understand what that means. And I have done it at the level of the University of Guyana by standing up for our students at UG whenever they needed representation. And sometimes it was an uphill task. Sometimes we had to really fight with the administration. You know, my colleague in Parliament, Sherrod Duncan, was also a president at UGSS, and we shared some good memories there. And it really called for some battle for us to let them know that we have a stake here, and perhaps we have the most important stake here. I say that to say to you, Dr. Hines, that I see trade unions along the same line. I believe that they sometime would have to really and truly put their foot down and send that message that they have a stake there, and a very important one. Now, I don't believe the People's Progressive Party will ever come around to respecting trade unions in this country, perhaps save and except, as was said, GAU, because they have a stake there. They have an interest in GAU, so to speak. And when you see they take the president of GAU and make him a member of parliament on their slate, That alone tells you what is going on there. But Dr. Hines, the reality is we as individuals who are the membership of these trade unions ought to give our leaders within the trade unions the full support and respect for them to fight for what is right for us. You see, the strength of the trade unions and the elected officials in the trade unions is as strong as its membership giving it that strength or giving them that strength. But if you have your membership not giving you that full support that you ought to have to send a strong message to the administration, in this instance, this regime, then it will always be a back and forth. When I look at how this regime deals with collective bargaining, and in this instance, absolutely none, because there wasn't even an attempt to speak to the unions, that alone should have triggered the public servants, doctors, teachers, nurses, and the working class of this country to put down their tools, to down tools. Because you cannot settle for an imposition of 8% when cost of living exceeds 8% in terms of inflation. When you go and shop, everything that you buy has gone up more than 8%. So that alone should have caused the public servants, the teachers, the doctors, the nurses, to down tools and say to the government that you need to honor the Constitution, respect the Constitution, follow what is enshrined, and at least meet with our unions. At least meet with them. Now, don't get me wrong, Dr. Hines. Any government can meet with the union, and the union can say, listen, we need 50% salary increase. The question is whether the government can sustain 50% salary increase, and so on. And then you can go into the negotiation. The government can propose 8%, as the PPP seems to like. They can go into a discussion. It can waiver. You can get 10%. You can get 12% coming, 20%. All of that can come through discussion. And then you can have varying ideas as to how sustainability of it and so on can come about. But the People's Progressive Party did not even start the process of negotiation. They did not even start the process of engaging. It was directly an imposition, and one that does not have a weight for the people who are working in this country, the honest, hard-working, tax-paying public servants. Because when they go into the shops and they have to purchase, whatever they're purchasing went up within the last couple of months more than 8%. And from August 2020, it even went higher from then to now.
Ganesh, one of the reasons I invited you to come on to the program tonight is because when they announced the 8%, you did a very incisive analysis of the numbers, in which you pointed out that the president himself is a public servant, and at the rate of 8%, he's taking home more than $1 million, while the public servant who earns minimum wage is taking home a pittance. I want you to bring those numbers to life for our audience. The first thing I want you to do is to say, in your estimation, given inflation, given the takings of the government, what would have been a reasonable salary raise at the minimum for public servants? And then go into the numbers.
David, if I had the powers to decide on salary increase, what I would have done, and this is me personally, I would have increased the income tax threshold. I would have increased it to $100,000. Right? That puts more disposable income in the small man's pocket, and at the same time, the people who are earning power salaries. And I would have looked at possibly increasing it higher than that too as time goes by. And in terms of percentage increase, I would have given the persons who are earning below $150,000, I would have looked to see to give them at least a 20% increase in their salaries. The persons who are earning below $500,000 to 150,000, between that bracket, I would have given them a 12% increase. And the one above, I would have given them an 8% increase. And that way, forgive me, I'm still under the weather a bit. That way, the small man who is working hard at the desk as a clerk, as a driver, as a security officer, as an accountant, as a secretary, those people who work hard, I would have ensured that they took home a greater percentage of benefit. In fact, I would have made the small man the real man. And that is how I would have done it. You asked me about the numbers that I put together. When I look at it, the president earns a salary of anywhere between $1.8 to $1.9 million a month. And that is outside of the perks that he enjoys. Remember, he drives around, fly around this country at no expense to him. He has a number of security guards. He eats free, he sleeps free, he enjoys electricity free, water free, all the basic commodities. His salary is not touched for those things. 8% on his salary, retroactive from January, will give him almost double per month. So if he gets 1.8 per month, and you add almost double, or you almost double that, he will be taking home for the month of December 3.5 million and more. And he doesn't have to touch that, because the Christmas village that he's going to have is taxpayers dealing with that. The Christmas dinner that he's going to host, taxpayers will pay for it. The Christmas party that he will host, taxpayers will pay for it. No part of his salary, no part of his salary will come out to fund any activity. But let's look at the ordinary man, somebody who earns $100,000. And that's being very gracious, because there are people in this country who work for $70,000 a month and they're expected to survive on that. They have to take public transportation to get to work. They got to pay for that. They got to pay for the gas that they use to cook. Or even if they're using a little fireside or so, they got to pay for the kerosene. They got to pay for electricity. They got to pay for water. If they have a family, they have to pay sums of monies to take care of them too. And their increase is merely going to be about $60,000 retroactive. If you're working for 70,000, about 60,000 retroactive. It's unconscionable. 8% is unconscionable, especially across the board. Why would you want to give a man who earns $100,000 8% and a man who earns $1,800,000 8% too? Why would you want to do something like that and then want to come and tell us that you're doing something good? The people who actually are going to benefit from this 8% are the people who are earning $500,000 and more in salaries. And who are those people, Dr. Hines? Those people are the ministers of government. Those people are the permanent secretaries that were imposed in these ministries through political instructions. Those people are ministerial advisors. Those people are people who are within the friends, families, and favorite category of the People's Progressive Party. So it is a small clique of people who will enjoy this 8% salary increase. The president being one, the prime minister being two, his senior ministers, his junior ministers, the permanent secretaries, the ministerial advisors, and all the other political cronies that are around this country, employed by the People's Progressive Party, placed in high offices. They are the ones that will benefit from the 8%. But the public servants who have been with us through thick and thin, the public servants who work hard every single day to ensure that there is stability in the respective departments, ministries, and regions, the public servants who balance the book, who ensure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, who makes the politicians look good. The public servants who make the politicians look good. Because all politicians do is give instructions and say, do this and do that. And it's the public servant who has to make it happen. They have to find ways to maneuver and meander through the hurdles of the system to make it possible, and legally possible, I dare say. They are the ones that are not going to benefit from this 8% salary increase.
Ganesh Mahipaul, the Member of Parliament for the APNU AFC, digging into the reality of what 8% across the board means. And if we follow what Ganesh is saying, 8% across the board really mean a windfall for those who are at the top of the salary ladder. And the majority who are at the bottom of the ladder, in effect, they're taking home negative. They're taking home zero, because when you figure in inflation and you figure in cost of living and all that kind of stuff, the $60,000 that they're taking home, because of it was retroactive to January, really is zero. Lincoln Lewis, let me bring you in. What is the TUC saying that should, at least, if you were treated with dignity and the government had invited you to bargain, what is the number you were thinking about in terms of salary rates?
Let me say to you that in collective bargaining, they don't bargain with the TUC. They would have been bargaining with the Public Service Union.
Right, yes.
Right? But let me tell you what. Before all these numbers went up, we did an analysis which indicated that a person at the minimum, like a person who is entering the public service, and based on the dynamics, the economic dynamics in the society, that the minimum wage should be around $120,000. A person who entering the public service. And we take into, when we talk about that, we take into took into consideration even the police constable as one of the who fall at the lower rung of the police in the police force. A person who enter in the public service, that person must start new. And when that person finishes his probation, maybe for 6 or 3 months, that person is supposed to move on to a higher level. What we have done is to look at other skills in the system. We thought of it that what we should have done, what is needed, is performance appraisal, where you can appraise somebody and pay them increases on performance, not the single rate that currently exists, where everybody, if I am a constable or I am enter the public service as a clerk, and I'm there for 3 years in that category, and somebody come new, that person falls, will receive the same pay that I have been receiving, the clerk has been receiving. Not taking into consideration that that person may have been in that job, they have paid their dues as what we call it, as a probationer. They may be performing creditably. You need to pay them an incentive for that. In negotiation or in collective bargaining, we consider it. There are 2 things in it. You either get a pay for learning and improve it, and then when you meet your midpoint or the point for the job, you pay merit increments. We believe that those are 2 things that need to be put in place. One is that we were looking at a minimum of $120,000, but when you have all these movements, all these prices, that number needs to be revisited. And Ganesh made a very informed point about those who benefit from the across the board. When you're negotiating, you look at all those factors. We may look at the people who are at the lower rung of the ladder. They have to at the economic ladder, but they have to face the same market prices. We look at the person who is at a certain level. How can we balance paying a man 8%, a man who already is receiving $800,000 at 8%, and how can we pay a man who is getting $100,000 8% too? These are things that when all of us are expected to face the market the same place, may not be the same time, or we may have to. So those are type of things that we would like to see being addressed. We have reached the point where we are confident about one thing, that the PPP will not change. I said to some people, running up to the last election, there were some comrades who said to me, I believe they learned the lesson, they will change. I said they will never change. They will never change, because I'll tell you what, when you see a Jack deal, you know what you're up to. You take it back to 1999, I believe that he was the person who resisted, that led to that, resisted paying people, paying workers and increasing, arguing that he had a structural adjustment program and what have you, and can't break it and this and that, until a set of workers. And Ganesh already spoke about pulling on the road, coming to the street. The 1999 strike, it was not the public service union who really initiated the action. It was workers, some from customs, some from agriculture. It's about leaders who were public servants at the middle and upper level of the organization. Those were the people who led it, who led and put the union in a position that the union went on the road to do it. What you need is that what you don't have is that group or that category, that militancy in that category of workers anymore, who would challenge the union and prepare to stand with the union to challenge the government, right? What happened in '99, while Jagyo decided that there will be no, he was acting Minister of Finance, he decided that no increase must be paid. But the strike forced them into a position where they agreed to go to arbitration to resolve it, right? And when they went to arbitration and the award was given, the same agreement that they said was so sacred and cannot be broken, they went to the World Bank and the IMF and tell them, look, this is what happened, and we'll have to pay, and the agreement was adjusted. You know, I believe that what is happening here is what they decided on, what this man decided on, is that the public servants will pay for what they did in 1999. It's a reclamation, it's a wicked and vindictive act, and the old politics in this country has to change. No longer, you know, you started off, I listened to you, David, you started off by making some comments about the role of the trade union back in the 1990s, 1921, and so forth. Let me tell you something, David. In that period, coming to 1953, the trade union led the way, and the politicians joined, and we gave the politicians an agenda. What has happened over recent years is that many of us, what we do is to join with the, is to not join, but get on board with the politician. This culture has to change. It has to come where together we shall hold hands. Together we shall come up with the agenda. Together we shall govern.
Lincoln and Ganesh. Lincoln and Ganesh. Reality is that Guyana has more money than it has ever had. Public servants have always had to fight with previous governments to get money, to get a decent living wage. Most of the times the government said they didn't have the money. As you just said, Jagyo said he didn't have the money, and so on and so forth. That excuse cannot be made now because we have more money than before. And the government has been, without any due diligence, throwing money to various categories of citizenry. Why the continued, and I'm putting this to you, why in your mind this continued refusal to do it by public servants? Why?
David, the answer to that is very simple. The People's Progressive Party believes in total control. And when you underpay people and you cause them to spend what they get on essential alone, and they don't have the ability to put in the bank to save, or to go and have recreational activities, or to expose themselves to various different other activities, when they don't have that, it means that they are dependent on what you gave them for survivability alone. Now, if you are going to pay me $100,000 a month, and from that $100,000 a month, I have to ensure my child goes to school. I have to ensure that there is grocery in the kitchen for us to eat. I have to ensure that I cater for transportation cost. I have to ensure that I cater for electricity. I have to ensure I cater for the water bill. I have to ensure I have internet so my son or daughter can study. Those are essential spending. And when I use this $100,000 for my essential spending, it means that you have clouded my mind to believe that I can't say nothing against you. I can't do nothing against you because I'll have that fear that you're going to take away this 100, which is my monthly earning and my monthly expense. And I will have to go and sit there and work under duress, work under pressure for the next 100,000 the next month because of what cost of living has done. But when you pay a livable wage and you give people an amount of money that they can afford to spend and save and have a comfortable life, it is a method of empowerment. And the People's Progressive Party don't believe in empowering people. Because when they empower people, people see them in their true colors and walk away from them. And that is why I constantly tell people that there are educated young Indian people like myself who will never turn to the People's Progressive Party as a savior. Because we have removed ourselves from the environment of race politics, and we have removed ourselves from the grandmother, grandfather kind of teachings that because you're brown, you must go where brown there. And because you're black, you must go where black there. We have removed ourselves from that kind of teaching. And that is why I have great admiration. I have great admiration for people like Ganesh Prashad, who lives in Port Morant, who is an educator, and he speaks out against the atrocities of this regime. I have great respect for Daniel Siram, the chairman of Region 4, for the same purpose. I have great respect for Mayor Ubraj Narain, for Natasha Singh Lewis. These are people who recognize that this kind of politics that the People's Progressive Party enjoy and play is not what will move Guyana forward. And it is not what will develop our country. Coming back to what I was saying, Dr. Hines, a livable wage is an empowerment tool. And when you empower your people, you lift them, and it assists the country in removing social ills. It reduces social problems. You make your people comfortable by giving them things to make them happy. And there is nothing that people want now to make them happy other than a good salary, a livable wage for them and their families, so that they can be empowered, which will lead them to be entertained and which will lead them to live a good life. But if you're going to control that, and if you're going to do like what the PPP did, 8% across the board, people who are earning $500,000 and more, they already have a livable salary there, you know. Once you're earning $500,000 in this country, that's a livable salary. I can go as low as $350,000. It's a livable salary. Livable in the sense that you can pay your bills and still have a comfortable recreational life. But you're going to give them the 8% too. So you are giving them more disposable income in their pockets. They can afford to have their driver, they can afford to drive luxury vehicles, and they can afford to buy the things on the market. And the man who is lower, they will continue to be controlled by these pests. They will continue to be controlled by these demons. They will continue to be controlled by this regime, because the increase that they are getting is not giving them the real freedom they're looking for. And Guyana and Guyanese, under this kind of behavior, will forever be in the nightmare that they find themselves in, unless the people take a position and speak out, speak up, and take actions. Actions that are necessary to send a signal to the regime. I agree with Lincoln that the entry salary should be anywhere within the vicinity of $120,000 for public servants and all persons entering the public service. And I agree that there should be a revision of the salaries and the remuneration packages for the lower tiers of workers who are the hardest workers in the public system. Dr. Hines, I want to ask you for your leave at this point in time because my throat is really affecting me and I'm under the weather.
Right.
But I want to say to you that this discussion is necessary, and the people of Guyana ought to play their role in ensuring that they are not ridden. Instead, they must drive the government in the direction that they want to see the country go. Not the government must drive them. They have to drive the government. And if they sit quietly and they allow themselves to be fooled and bamboozled, then you can't plant Bora, my friend, and want to reap okra. I thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother, and thanks for coming on and lending your expertise and your knowledge of this subject. Plus, and I shall be engaging you as the weeks go by. Get well, use the usual bush thing you did on the West Coast to get all them things there and so on, and use awaken our man, so you know the story. But thank you very much for coming on. Lincoln, let me bring you in. Henry Jeffrey was here the other day, and he says, look, this thing about giving public sons next to nothing, it's not just but it is part of the larger domination agenda of the PPP. Do you agree?
It is a fact. This is naked politics by the PPP, you know. Let's take back it for it. Let's retreat for a moment. The coalition hadn't a lot of money. But in 2015, their first budget, they gave a sizable increase. I believe it's somewhere around 25%. Check it. It took the PPP about 8 consecutive years before they could have given a 25% increase. Think about it. What they are doing here is pauperizing a group of people. And, you know, I'll tell you this. There was a man by the name of Winston Jones who was a field secretary for the Public Service Union in New Amsterdam, who had written Dr. J. Gunn to say that he was at a meeting at Freedom House in New Amsterdam, where the man said they were primarily East Indians in there. He said to them, you will have to join the public service, and when we have enough Indians in there, we are going to give sizable increases. Check it. That man is still in the government that we were talking about. Check who he gives the contracts to. This guy, this year, is what I call economic genocide. It's one of the elements of the old program of economic genocide being committed against the people. A lot of people don't want to call it for what it is, but that's what it is. They've decided, and I made a point earlier, which is a part of the process. These guys are so annoyed. They're vexed. They have to pay that the public servants cost them to pay an increase that they didn't want to give in 1999. An increase that they didn't want to give in 1990. So they say that you caused us to give it in 1990, and we ain't gonna give you now. You gonna take what we're giving you. You check it. That the men who were there were three in the 1999 arbitration panel. There were three men. One is now the governor of the Bank of Guyana. The other one is Professor Clive Thomas, and another one was Dr. Armstrong. You ask yourself, how will they see the two of them, Armstrong and Jim? They will never give them any work. From that time of the arbitration, check and see, even if they have consultancy or they have anything, they will never engage them. They must not eat. They must starve. That is how these people behave. So when Henry is talking about a wider agenda, the agenda includes that behavior. So when they are accused now of discrimination and they're running all around the place and trying to get people to say they're not discriminating, everybody knows that. David, that's what we are up against. But we have to fight.
But we have to fight. And what a way to end our program. We have reached that time, and we have to be very careful with time these days because we are sharing platforms with the show that comes immediately after the show. In fact, it started Mr. Shara Duncan. So we've got to go. But before we go, let me just congratulate Tejanarain Chandrapal, who made his test debut in the current test match going on in Perth, Australia. We were hammered, our bowlers, almost 600 runs. Chandrapal has made a brisk and decent start. He's 47 not out overnight. Here is hoping that today he carries on and continues that rich tradition of Guyanese and Caribbean batsmanship. Congratulations to Tejanarain Chandrapal. Congratulations also to Brother Hakeem Jeffries for attaining a position that was not possible for a black man in America until now. The first black person to lead a major party in Congress, one of the two major parties. Brother Hakeem is a friend of justice in Guyana, and we salute him because when he rises, all the sons and daughters of the enslaved rise with him. We always knew that we were equal. We always knew that we could do what others could do. But because of the various barriers that have been put in our way, we have to constantly prove ourselves, the first this and the first that and the first that. We were the first people, Africans, all other races, all other ethnic groups came from Africa. We were first. We, Africans, pioneered humanity. Lincoln Lewis, closing thoughts.
David, and brothers and sisters, let me tell you what. We have to carry on. We are standing on the shoulders of strong men and women. Critchlow, Polydor, Burnham, Jagan, and all these men. We cannot allow ourselves to be beaten into submission at this time. We have to go back to not the table, but we have to go back to the drawing board. And we have to develop a program, a plan and a program consistent with what we had pre-independence. How we are going to cause our political brothers and sisters to behave by looking after our interests and not theirs. Good night. May you enjoy the rest of the week. David?
And thank you, Lincoln. Thank you for coming on. Coretta, I know is traveling back to the city and didn't make it back on time, but we're gonna have her next week and to come on. And for you, the audience, who continues to stick by us and with us, thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you all back here next week. God willing, we will continue our discourse. You know, they say that we make trouble here in the evening. Well, you are the judge. If we make trouble, John Lewis says, it is good trouble that we make. Have a nice weekend.